Welcome to DLN Xtend. We choose topics covered by the Destination Linux Network that we think need some more discussion because, they skip over things and the conversation here is just better. So these shows include Destination Linux, Ask Noah, Linux for Everyone, This Week in Linux, Das Geek, Tux Digital, and Zebedee Boss Gaming. I'm Nate, a Linux fitness and vintage tech enthusiast with an almost unhealthy obsession with the OpenSUSE project.
And I'm Eric, a web technologist and Linux aficionado. So Nate, what have you been up to this week?
Christmas. I love Christmas time.
I've heard that you like Christmas. Tell me what you've done with those Christmas lights of yours.
Well, I consider myself one of Santa's elves. So do I believe in Santa Claus? Yes, but I'm his elf. And I decided to, now I wasn't going to this year, but my oldest basically told me, he kind of called me out, said this year I was going to put the Christmas lights to music. And so I did. I did a couple of sequences, which took me a lot of time. One was the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, Wizards in Winter, and the other was Christmas Eve in Sarajevo. And, these are kind of typical ones that are used. So I wasn't doing anything particularly creative. I just happened to want to do those two songs. And so I did them. And I really enjoyed it. And actually, what I think is funny, when I went to record the second sequence, there was a car parked out in front of my house waiting for it to start. So...
Well, and you also made some videos to show the rest of us what you've been working on and put a post together on the Discourse forum. And lots of people shared their feedback and their love of your effort. I myself, having seen the video, I had a sneak preview before others saw it. Yeah, the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, the reason it's used is because it goes so well with light shows. Like, as you demonstrated, the beat and just the rhythm of things really lend themselves. And there was a sequence in there a couple minutes in where I was just sort of watching this going, I couldn't imagine what it'd be like standing there in front of it. I'm just looking at my computer screen, but very, very exciting, very well thought out and put together. So you did an amazing job on that.
Well, thank you very much. It's very kind. What I did notice is that it would have been better had I had a camera that was better at nighttime filming. Because if you notice, you could see like the shutter, well, not shutter, but the iris in it was adjusting awful lot when it would do the bright flashes. So I need to have a better solution for that for next year. A real camera. I'm sure there's somebody that you can think of that is a photographer that we know that I should probably talk to. What do you think?
Yes, there is someone that comes to mind. It's a little foggy. She's a friend of DLN.
Uh-huh.
It's Wendy, isn't it?
Wendy, yes.
Wendy.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
You know what? I bet you she could help you out with that. There's probably something you can do to fix the aperture or something.
Yeah, something.
That's the right word. I know nothing about photography.
Neither do I. Anyway, so yeah, that was fun to do. I still have my Christmas lights up because as we record this on the 1st of January, it is technically the 8th day of Christmas by the old tradition. So I'll keep my stuff up until the 6th. That's when I'll take everything. I'll take the roll back the Christmas portion of my lights.
But there will be lights that stay, right? I mean, I think you're going to try to have a year-round lighting show. Has this become like a permanent installation?
Yes, parts of it are permanent, yeah. And actually, between you and me, since nobody else is listening, I bought some snowflakes to put on my house, like for wintertime. So they're 16 inches in diameter to put these pixel lights in, the programmable ones, and I'll put those on the front of my house and just kind of have them twinkling and doing little things at night, when it's night out, just for fun. I don't have any plans for any like sequences for it, but just something to kind of brighten up around my world, essentially. So what have you been up to, Eric?
Well, I've been taking a bit of a break. I was on vacation for a week and more or less have just been kind of relaxing, unplugging a little bit and just trying to take my time through the end of the year. And here we are on the 1st of January, 2020. So we're getting back to it, recording our podcast, and going to start back at making some YouTube content and some blog posts and just trying to get back into the swing of things. And in that spirit, I've tried out a couple things recently. So the EndeavourOS release with the net installer came out just before Christmas, and that was a great little surprise for everybody. It's pretty fantastic. It's exactly what I was hoping they would get to, which is, when you're installing, you get to pick which desktop you want. It's very similar to what OpenSUSE does with, the ability to just pick from the installer hey, this is the desktop I want. I like that. I think that's a nice way to do it instead of having to download a different ISO for every single desktop. It's not a big deal, but it is just nice to have that single ISO installer, and you say, okay, on this machine, I'm going to put Plasma, or on this machine, I'm going to put Mate, or, I mean, they have pretty much everything on there in terms of choice. Pretty neat. I was really happy to see that they pulled that off. They had planned on having it out in November, and that didn't happen. And I think there was some level of perhaps disappointment, but ultimately the community pitched in and got it done, and it works great.
So the standout feature then of the latest Endeavour is the ability to pick and choose which desktop that you use. Is it more like the OpenSUSE way where it's kind of buried, or is it more like the Debian way where it's exposed?
It's actually somewhere in between, because when you first fire up the installer, it asks you, do you want to do an offline or an online install? And that's sort of your first choice. If you say offline, then you're going to get the standard XFCE Endeavour desktop. And if you say online, then you jump into the Calamares installer. It doesn't ask you as the first question, which desktop do you want? So you actually go through all of the steps of selecting your locale and all of that stuff. And then it gets to a screen where it gives you a list of the choices. And from there, then you just pick, which one you want. And then it goes through and the rest of the install procedure. And when it's done, you've got a lovely, mostly stock Arch install of whatever desktop you chose, with some Endeavour packages as part of that. But it's very close to just vanilla sort of stock Arch, which is nice, because I think that's what that's what I'm looking for. Is I don't want a ton of customization. They have a nice wallpaper, which is a nice touch, but otherwise they're not heavily theming or heavily changing things. And I guess if I had one criticism of Manjaro, that would be it, is that all of their desktop spins are heavily customized, and that's fine. I mean, it's nice that someone takes the time to go through and set things up, but it's also, they've made a lot of choices for you. And one of the things I really appreciate about Arch is that when you install, if you just do a vanilla install of Arch and then you install any of the desktops, you're getting like the factory. There's nothing changed. It's literally whatever the defaults are. And from there, then you can do whatever you want, versus I feel like with something like Manjaro, in a lot of cases, I'm undoing someone else's decisions that they've made or choices they've made. And so having Endeavour give you a very, very close to Arch experience, but making it worlds easier to install because you're just going through a graphical installer. It's a pretty interesting, powerful thing. And like I said, I think this is what a lot of people were waiting for and hoping to see, and they've managed to pull it off.
Historically, I've been one that's preferred to just give me a vanilla experience and let me shape it to what I want. And then being a part of the Biddle community and trying out other distributions, I've really appreciated what distributions like Ubuntu do and how they express the distribution. And also like XFCE, I've liked some of the MX Linux and Peppermint's kind of a combination of things. But I like seeing these very customized distributions as well. So I don't know what I like anymore, because on one side, with Endeavour, I like that they're giving me a vanilla experience, but at the same time with Manjaro, I like that it kind of maybe, knocking off some of the rough edges on some of these desktop environments to kind of give a better experience. But at the same time, I'm probably going to change those anyway. So I'm kind of back and forth in what it is that I think is the better way to do it. OpenSUSE obviously is very vanilla, or very close to vanilla. I mean, they basically do some light theming and they leave all the defaults pretty much whatever's upstream. And I appreciate that, because then now I know what the upstream is and then I change it accordingly. But I don't know. I'm back and forth on this all the time. I used to think I knew what I wanted, but now I'm not sure that I know what I want anymore. But I do like that Endeavour is choosing a different path than Manjaro as far as how they give you the desktops. I think that is a good choice in and of itself.
There has to be some differentiation. I get that, right? I mean, you can't, if everybody shipped the same stock vanilla desktop environment, I mean, it's really sort of, it'd be like every car coming in the same color type of thing. So I get that there's, like, OpenSUSE is a good example where they have, the green color scheme throughout, which makes sense because, I mean, that's their colors. And other distributions will do similar things. For example, the other thing I was doing this week was looking at Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix. To me, when I use Cinnamon, much like when I use Plasma, there's sort of one look that I'm used to. So Plasma is the Breeze theme, and that's just kind of, I know there's lots of different themes out there, but ultimately that's what I always come back to because that's what I'm used to. I like the way the icons look, the way the window controls look. It's just what I'm used to. And in Cinnamon, I'm used to the Mint themes. And so when I was using Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix, they chose a very different style of theme. Not a bad one. It looks great. It's very unique. It's very distinctive. It's got a warm sort of feel to it. It's dark. So it has a very nice aesthetic, but it's because it's Cinnamon. I look at it and I go, that doesn't look right. And so I immediately go, how do I get the mint themes on here? And so that's exactly what I did. I mean, I used it the way they had it for about an hour or two. And then I just kind of thought, for better, for worse, I'm just used to it being that way, the way it looks on Mint. And so, I went and got it's not hard to do. I just went and grabbed the themes and the icons and, you just put them in the user share directory and there you go. But what's impressive to me, and this is actually something we're going to get to a little bit in the Destination Linux discussion, is the fact that Cinnamon, there is a Cinnamon option on top of a current release of Ubuntu. And that's, to me, the most interesting and important part of that. And one of the reasons that I don't use Mint is because it's on an LTS base. So this kind of gets around that. But to your point, it is Cinnamon. It's mostly stock with a different theme and feel and differentiation to sort of say, hey, we are doing something slightly different, but ultimately it's still relatively close to what you'd expect. There is definitely room for people to make things their own. But for me personally, I appreciate more when they do things on the system level where they make it easier for me to install, add a printer or to administer the system, give me tools to do those sorts of things. So if you're going to spend time on customizing or differentiating your distro, I look more for those types of things than I do necessarily what does the theme look like. But there's obviously some distros that are very polarizing with their theme. You think of Zorin, that's GNOME, but it's GNOME, Jim, but not as we know it, right? It's totally totally different.
Yeah, exactly. And
they very much differentiate themselves based on that. And it's another LTS base. And, I feel like when you look at those LTS based distros, that's what you're seeing in these sort of the differentiations in the style and the tools that are given. So yeah, I mean, it's always interesting to me. I mean, we had just gone through the elementary challenge and that was a big challenge to work through something that was very different, and having sort of my already set opinions about what Cinnamon looks like and to use a different, someone else's opinion of that. And it's interesting and fresh and sort of challenges me a little bit. The same thing with Endeavor, pulling that off where, it's kind of slightly magical to just say, oh, I want this desktop. And it just works so well. We've seen a lot of great things come out of 2019. Here we are, the beginning of 2020, and it's going to be a heck of a year.
Yeah, I think so too. I want to circle back a little bit. So I like how you're saying you focus more on the underpinnings of the distribution and what they're doing to make working with it, not just at a user level, but as administrator level. That's how you're looking at a distribution, as opposed to just the window dressing. Although window dressings are nice, but I see where you're coming from. That I think that's very interesting, and I think that I'm more like that as well, because I can put whatever window dressings I want on my desktop, as it were. I think it's really good. And I think it's interesting to hear your perspective of it, because if you hear like some people, they they focus a lot more on the window dressings than they do in the actual function of the distribution.
It has to be cohesive, right? You have to give people a reasonably solid, clean experience out of the box. But ultimately, most of that is window dressing. And once people get past that initial impression and start using the system, if you haven't put the time and effort behind that, then that's going to show way more. Of course, that first impression could be bad, and you don't want that. MX is a great example. I'm not a fan of the XFC desktop, so I immediately go, eh. But then I look at the tools and the fact that they have so many, their installer is really great, their tool set's really great. They make it very easy to use the system. That more than balances out, my initial sort of, I'm not into this because it's XFC. So it is an interesting thing when you're producing a distro and you have to put thought, you have finite resources, finite time, and you say, well, where do we put this time and
right.
These resources? Some of it has to be differentiation and window dressing, but hopefully a substantial portion goes into the underpinnings, because I think that's what counts.
And I think that's probably why I like the vanilla Debian so much. And you're probably like, oh, what? But I happen to like Debian distributions because I feel like there's a lot of emphasis put on those underpinnings and nothing put on the window dressing at all. And I think since I did grow up in Linux as such, I'm probably just accustomed to looking at those base portions of the distributions, but which is why, I mean, all the Ubuntu, so many distributions are based off of Ubuntu, really. I mean, they do so much work on the underpinnings and letting the flavors fancy it up, I guess, if you want to call it that they're so successful. So we got some listener feedback. Can you believe that?
I know, it's fantastic.
It's Anthony Lavado. He said, "Hey there, I'm from Jellyfin core team." And he gives his GitHub link. It's just trying to offer any assistance for any questions you might have as you try test Jellyfin. I'm also happy to discuss anything you might want to know about the project. I think that's really exciting. And last time we talked, I said I was getting to media servers, and I meant to start testing Jellyfin, but I haven't started yet. And so I'm still playing with Emby. To dovetail into that, because I buy movies, and I'm probably like one of the last 6 people to actually buy DVDs and Blu-rays now. I also discovered something called Make MKV to take the Blu-rays and turn them into files, these MKV files for Emby to play. So this is really good news, I think, because I am definitely going to try. Well, I really want to try Plex next because I think I want to end on Jellyfin. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think to have a balanced opinion, an informed opinion, you should try them all.
Yes.
I've actually been using Plex again just to see. And, it's definitely more polished. But again, like I said, when we were talking about this originally, Plex has had a long time and they're also well funded at this point. They weren't initially, I don't believe. But, they've taken a lot of time and have had the luxury, I guess, of all of that time and resources to polish a lot of that stuff. Now, that said, it's not perfect. I still had some issues with getting the ports open properly to stream things around the house. And they're doing this thing where it's probably going to annoy some people. It annoyed me. So it used to be, and it's this way in Emby and also in Jellyfin, where your content is what you're seeing. All right, you go in there and whatever libraries you add, that's what you see. Well, Plex now is pulling in, web content. They've got their own streaming service. They've got news. They've got all of this stuff, and they prioritize that above your libraries. So when you go to the home screen, what you see is all of their content and not any of yours by default. Now you can pin yours and you can change the home screen, but I find that to be a very interesting decision on their part, where Plex was always a home media server, and that first and foremost, and then you had plugins and you could extend it and choose to do those things. But now it's like their content is forward and your content, you have to actually go to a secondary menu to get to. It's interesting. I get it, because I think that for a lot of people who have, like I have a Roku, or, if you have a smart TV that has apps and stuff like I think people are becoming more accustomed to that approach. But again, it's the whole point of it for you and for me is that it's a media server for my content first, and then that other stuff secondarily. So it's definitely a strange and a huge difference, in my opinion, to Emby and Jellyfin, that they sort of bury your content and put theirs as first and foremost. So I think you should try it. I think you should look at it just to see what they've done and get your take on that. Maybe I'm just being really sensitive to that. It seems odd to me. And I would love to talk to Anthony about, Jellyfin and what they're doing and where they're going, maybe do some testing, whatever, he's looking to talk about would be great. I think we'll find some way to work that in. And I really appreciate, Anthony, you writing in and letting us know that you are offering to do this.
On one hand, I can see the business case, what Plex is doing, but at the same time, I see the good and the bad in that. I would almost like to see that in Jellyfin too, possibly, so it would be a cohesive media player, but then would that be treading on Cody? I don't know. I think it's interesting.
Well, I think having a system that's extensible, right, that you could put plugins and web content and do more with it than just have files on a disk somewhere that are being served up in a pretty fashion, essentially. Not to keep saying the same thing over and over. When you're doing this, you're putting it on your system, you are hosting it, you are updating it and maintaining it. So to me, that means that your content should be the first class material that you're seeing. And Plex just gives me that impression that it's like, well, yeah, we do that too. Where that's a total 180 from where they used to be, and a 180 from what Jellyfin and Emby and others provide.
Huh. We learn something every day. So this week on Linux for Everyone, Jason talked about his 12 months of Linux discoveries. He talked about POP, Elementary, the changes with Microsoft, and so forth. What I want to know is, Eric, what would you say your Linux discovery was for this year?
This was the year that I discovered the Linux community in an actual sort of real way. I've been using Linux for close to 20 years now, and most of that time, all of that time, except for this year, was more or less on my own and having no peers or really no kind of community other than, I guess, if you call forums, linuxquestions.org and stuff like that, right. Where I would go and, I'd fish for answers. I'd find stuff to learn and do, but it was never in the spirit of belonging or being social with other people who were doing similar things. And so the beginning of this year, well, last year, it's 2020 now. At the beginning of 2019, a couple months in, I found Michael Tunnell's This Week in Linux videos on YouTube, and was watching those. And, I went back and was watching the history of those. And then at some point he mentioned Destination Linux, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll look for that. And I found them, and then made the connection between that and Rocco and Big Daddy Linux. It has all kind of led me to literally what we're doing right now, recording this podcast and our friendship and our communication and the other people that I've met and have become friends with. So from a technical or sort of Linux specific perspective, not a lot has changed for me. I'm still doing the same things I've been doing, but now I do it with other people instead of just doing it myself, and knowing that other people are out there. And, if people are listening and you haven't engaged in the community, I mean, like I said, I spent close to 2 decades just kind of doing it on my own. And there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to be part of a community, but it's just so rewarding.
So much more fun.
It's just been very rewarding to me. I've learned so much. I've met so many good people and nice people. I know people from all around the world now, literally all around the world. It's incredible to me. And I talk to these people on a regular basis. It's really enriched my life in a big way. And that's definitely been my biggest discovery around Linux this year.
Now, for me, that was like when I kind of tried getting involved in some communities like over time, but never really kind of asserted myself. And it was actually Big Daddy Linux, Rocco, last year, November, when I started getting involved in that community. And I would say because of that, like you, I mean, I was involved in the OpenSUSE forums and the community there, but that was pretty much it. I didn't really venture out. It's like I was, what's that fear agoraphobia, when you fear going outside? It's almost like I had that, Linux agoraphobia. Anyway, when getting to know the people on Biddle, and then meeting you, that has been, for me, it was like 2019 was when I went from just being a lot more isolated to getting to know people through Telegram and the discourse on the different forums and so forth, and becoming a part of Destination Linux Network, which has really been fantastic and a lot of fun. Getting to meet you, and then now we talk at each other every week. When we're not on vacation. And it's been loads of fun. I totally agree. And it's also done a lot for like trying new things or pushing my boundaries. Has been a lot more of that too, because of the community. And I want to just second what you're saying, and getting involved in the wider Linux community has really done a lot for challenging me and getting me to grow more. I would say, without hesitation, I've learned and grown more in the last 2 years than I did in the previous 10, for sure, 10, 12 years, for sure, in Linux. I mean, without question. So yeah, it's been fun. And I think that's pretty awesome.
It's really something unexpected. I lurked and watched, the Big Daddy Linux Live stream. I was lurking in the corner.
Yeah.
It just looked fun. It just looked like a group of people that I could sit there and talk to. And as we've mentioned before on this program, it's not easy being a technical person. It's not something you can just randomly talk to most people in the world about. It's something you might be very passionate about, have a lot of knowledge and a lot invested in. And it's just so easily dismissed by the greater majority of the populace.
Right.
And it's defeating and a little sad at times, because people, even if they like you and know you, they want to know about your life and what you do. And as soon as you start talking tech, it's like they just zone out.
Yeah, the eyes gloss over.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this stream going, wow, these look like people that I could go on and actually have a conversation with. It took me a few weeks of watching it to kind of build up the courage, and then I finally said, well, hey, let's give it a shot. I mean, that was it. The first time I did it, and everybody was so welcoming, and it was just such a great experience. Everything that I do now around Linux has some involvement with these communities, and I completely agree with you. I've learned more, not only because the people are very smart and passionate about what they're doing, but they also have a different perspective than I do. The fact that I'm trying different things and I have an open mind in a way that I really didn't as much before. Like you said, you were part of that insular community, and that was, that's what you focused on, and you didn't really stretch outside of that too much. And that's what I love about the diversity of these communities is it's people who use all different things, and it's people who are very highly technical and professional, and people who are hobbyists who like technology, and people who want an alternative choice, or people who are staunchly, believe in free and open source software and privacy. It's just this great mix of all of these people. And
yeah, all types, from the pragmatic to the not as pragmatic. So this week on Destination Linux, they talked about the release of Ubuntu Cinnamon. And Noah was not really all excited about the release of it, so I didn't really see the purpose of it because Mint exists. I'm picking up that you don't necessarily agree with that viewpoint.
I've heard that from several different people, so I'm not just calling out Noah on this one. I think there are a lot of people that say, well, there is an Ubuntu Cinnamon version. It's Mint. But Mint is also based on an LTS. The advantage of Ubuntu Cinnamon Remix is that it is based on 19.10. It has an updated set of packages. It has a newer kernel. It has, newer firmware. It is more modern than an almost 2-year-old LTS base at this point. And yes, there's hardware enablement. There's some things you can do, but ultimately Ubuntu 19.10 runs better on my system, has more up-to-date software, so I have less reliance on Flatpaks and stuff like, external sources of software. It's a better experience for me to be using Cinnamon on an updated Ubuntu base. So there does seem to be legitimate interest. The Telegram group already has over 300 members. They've had a lot of downloads off of their SourceForge page. I've seen, quite a bit of discussion about it, and I've been using it, and it's good, especially for a first release. You have to keep in mind how much goes into that. And,
right, yeah.
It's stable. It's mostly complete. There's definitely some rough edges. It's not perfect, but it's the first release. And I think it has its place, and I'm very happy that they're doing it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad they're doing it as well. I don't really use Mint, and I'm not really what I would call an avid fan of Cinnamon. I do appreciate the project, but I kind of think that, maybe in some ways having Ubuntu Cinnamon out there, especially not being on the LTS, being on the interim releases, that's going to be better for the development on the Mint side, because they can knock off some of those rough edges before it even gets to Mint. I mean, at least that's how I look at it, unless I'm off on that. And also having it based on, not the right term, but like vanilla Ubuntu, using that on that base will be more in line with the other flavors of Ubuntu.
And that's a good point, because Mint does do some things quite differently from Ubuntu. Keep in mind, too, that they use Ubuntu, but in some cases slightly begrudgingly. They have a version with Debian, and I think that's kind of hedging their bets in case they don't want to keep using Ubuntu for whatever reason. They really don't like the inclusion of snaps, and so they've gone with Flatpak. They changed some things, so they, instead of using the apt that would come with Ubuntu, they've got their own custom wrapper on apt, and it doesn't quite work the same way. And so there's sort of enough differences where Mint is not like running Ubuntu. It's really not. I mean, yes, maybe let's say it's an 85% experience of running Ubuntu, but they've made enough changes that for someone like me, when I run it, it's noticeable. There are things that kind of bug me because I expect it to be like Ubuntu, and there's just enough that's different that it's not like Ubuntu. I would say Pop! OS is another good example of that, where yes, it's an Ubuntu base, but they've made a lot of changes. They're using system deboot. They're doing a lot of sort of different things than Ubuntu does. So it's not just the base. They've made substantial changes. So when Pop came out, people said, well, what's the point of this? It's just window dressing on top of what's already there. And, they've very much differentiated themselves, I think, in many meaningful ways. So Mint is the same way. So that sort of circles me back to the argument of saying, well, why would we need a Cinnamon version of Ubuntu? And the answer is because there isn't one. On This Week in Linux, Michael talked about lots of things, as Michael tends to do, which is great. And that's why it's a show you should definitely listen to, because he's very thorough and finds lots of stories that we don't hear about. But one that we were aware of, because our friend Farron is he's very upfront about the fact that he develops an OS, and he lets people know, which is great because we get to follow the progress. And so something he's been working toward for quite a while is this whole legacy Cinnamon desktop, and then trying to switch over to Plasma, and a lot of the customization and things he's been doing. He's worked with the different teams directly, the KDE Plasma team and different distros. And so he's been putting tremendous amount of effort into getting this release out, where he wants to separate out. So Farron OS now, the latest release, that means when you download Farron OS, the main edition is the Plasma release, and the legacy edition is the Cinnamon desktop, which he's going to support for some amount of time. But the focus is now on the Plasma release, or the Plasma base, with his substantial changes on top of it. We thought this was a really interesting topic for folks who haven't checked out Farron OS. This is a perfect example when I talk about people who say there's too much fragmentation or too many distros. And Farron is a young guy who does presumably the majority of this or all of this by himself. And he's done amazing things in terms of customization, bringing different pieces of different desktop environments together in a cohesive way, and in a way that I really haven't seen another distribution do. And so, again, the merit of these people who have this passion for making their vision of what a desktop should be, of what Linux could be, of what using a computer could be, this is incredibly valuable. And so he's been able to do this. And after, I can't imagine, thousands of hours of work this year to get this out, he has released it. Absolutely worth checking out. Nate, did you get a chance to take a look?
I did. And what I think is really interesting is how he has various desktop paradigms that you can choose. He has the Redmond or the Windows 7 and previous look layout, kind of a familiar desktop. But he has one called Familiar Desktop, which is what I think is a really great reimplementation of the Windows 10 look and feel. Now, that's not my jam, but I thought it was really well done. So I'm just thinking in my mind, for somebody who comes from Windows 10, they're very comfortable in that environment. Having it look like that, would be fantastic for them. It'd be a good gateway into using Plasma. He also had a Unity layout and then a Mac OS style layout too. And I didn't really look at those as in depth, but also it just underscores the power of Plasma and how customizable it is, and how you can mold it to shape your vision and your idea of what a desktop should be. And I really appreciate that. But the fact that Farron was able to take it and not only just kind of do it, but do it with such gusto and vigor, where, it's such a well done theming that he's done to it, and I'm really impressed by his talent and skills. And I'm also equally as impressed by how much he keeps pushing his distribution. When it comes to beating a drum, he is really good at it, and I think it's well deserved too, because he does a really good job in his design of what he's doing at Farron OS. It's not just another KDE desktop. It's not just another Plasma desktop. This is different. This is a different experience, and I want to try this one again. And I'm hoping that actually it'll come up as a bit of challenge here in the near future, because I'm really excited to see what he's done with Plasma for his distribution. I don't know. I think it's really cool, and And it's amazing because he's not very old. He's a young kid, much younger than I, and he's done a lot more in Linux in his lifetime than I think I've done in mine. And kudos to him for all that he's done. I'd like to actually meet him, like actually shake his hand and say well done. What else can you talk about besides FairNOS?
Oh, I'm sure there are plenty of things, but hey, you know what? He puts a lot of effort into it. He wants to make sure people know that it's out there, and particularly folks in the community. So he's active in chats, YouTube streams and forums and Telegram, and he should be. And he's put, like I said, so much work into this. And I think particularly the cohesion of everything is impressive, to say the least, but the way that he has teased out some of the settings panels. So KD Plasma, as you well know, but maybe some other folks don't, has a sort of large general sort of desktop settings control panel. And it combines a lot of different modules and more or less embeds them into a single view, and you just kind of go through the menus. But all of those modules are also things that could just be called independently. And so what he's done as part of his sort of walkthrough setup process, which is amazing, by the way. I mean, a lot of distros have welcome screens, but in terms of like welcome and let's go ahead and just like get this thing set up the way you want it to be. We're going to pick our, like you're saying, the different layouts, the different themes, it's granular enough that it allows you to make it your own and feel that you can have a starting point that's comfortable for you, but not so overwhelming. He's been able to tame that control panel to some degree by going through, and as you go through this progression of steps, you can actually launch those different pieces of the control panel independently and set different functions and features and settings on the desktop through his sort of welcome process. And it's amazing. And he's also hinted at, because again, he's been in close contact and collaboration with these different teams, that perhaps we're going to see some improvements on the Plasma side, proper in Plasma itself, to some of the theming and other things. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if that is as a result of what he's been doing. Again, someone coming up with fresh ideas and that getting taken back upstream into a main project.
Right.
Congratulations to him on being able to achieve this. I hope we do get to try it out on Biddle. I think it would be a great experience for everybody to give feedback, and it's certainly worthy of being looked at.
I totally agree. So this last week, Zeb, our buddy, he did a live stream, a 24-hour live stream for Free Geek, and he raised $1,500. That's a lot. And I watched a large portion of the stream. I'd say probably because I wasn't home to watch it all, but for the parts that I was home, I had it on in one room or another. He started out the stream, full of gusto and vigor, and like the last couple hours, I went to sleep and I woke up and, it was a whole nother day for me from when he started to when he finished. And I was asleep before he finished up his stream, but like that last couple hours or the portion that I caught, man, you could tell he was pretty wiped. And it was fun to listen to Ryan and Michael, just kind of the banter between them, and then them picking on Zeb while he's barely conscious doing this live stream. I thought it was hilarious, and it was a good stream. It was a lot of fun. A lot of people came into the chat and were giving me a hard time. I gave him a hard time, and he even did me a nice favor, and he did like some Christmas loads because I love Christmas. What can I say? And he did like a Christmas load, so he couldn't go very fast, and he kind of complained about that. But anyway, it was it almost makes me want to try that Euro Truck or American Truck Simulator, just because he slams into caravans and does all these really, really amusing things. And I think it might be good training for my younger kids to the rules of the road, as it were, or maybe not. I don't know, because the way Zeb drives.
Well, you don't have to drive that way,
right?
And it's fairly realistic in the kind of the physics of driving a truck from the sense of like the weight of a load and like the turning radius and stuff like that. I mean, there's no crash damage, and it's a little silly that, you know, you can slam into something at 60 miles an hour and there's no physics for crashing, really. It damages the vehicle, but there's no visible damage.
Gotcha.
Anyway, I may have spent some hundreds of hours playing that game, potentially, allegedly. In ATS, there's something very zen and kind of hypnotic. Yeah, it is a surprising thing because you look at it and you go, it's a truck simulator. Like, really? How much am I going to get out of this, right? And I remember seeing someone playing it, and it was before I even knew who Zeb was. This was years ago, and just thinking it just can't be that. I mean, it just seems like it wouldn't be that much fun. And I tried it and I was like, wow, this is actually really engaging. And yeah, so I mean, if it's not something you've ever tried, I think it's worth checking it out. And it's just fun. You can take it seriously. Like, some people have simulators where they've got a whole cab built up and a steering wheel and a shifter. Oh yeah, like some of these people have it, like, you know, 6 screens wrapped around them, and like it's kind of silly. But hey, I mean, if that's what you're into, I mean, some people really dig it, and, you know, kudos to them for going through all those steps. Like, you want to talk hardware and it's like some crazy setups. Like, yeah, there's some fun videos out there.
Oh, I'm sure.
Or you can do it using the WASD, you know, on a keyboard or your arrow keys. And it's certainly I'm not as immersive as that might be, but it's still very relaxing. And there's just something about, like, a lot of games are very intense, you know, shooters, and like you just fast motion and twitch, and like you got to react and jump around and like all this. And this is just very sort of, you know, you're going with the flow. You're on a route. You've got a load. Mm-hmm. You're kind of, if you leave on the simulation part, you've got to make it so far and then pick where you're going to stop for fuel or to rest, or I don't know. There's something very sort of calming about that. Just it's not jumpy. There's no twitch. There's no noise and like loud and flashing, and, you know, it's very zen. It's definitely worth giving it a shot if you haven't. To do it for 24 hours and to take a break, you know, once every 4 hours and get a cup of tea and go to the bathroom and whatever he was doing to keep himself awake.
Yeah, that was a lot of work there.
It is. It's not easy to do. He mentioned at some point, it might have been the post show on Biddle or something, that when he was younger, he had stayed up for like 46 hours or 50 hours or something when they were doing some kind of migration of systems. And yeah, I mean, I remember being in my 20s and being a sysadmin and, you know, staying up for a day and a half, 2 days. You can do it because you're young and can do it. I mean, and I'm not saying that I'm not being ageist, you know, I myself am getting older. I find that I think that would be a very difficult thing to do. So kudos to him for doing it and for raising the money. And, you know, it's great for Free Geek, and it's such a great cause. And for him to do that, it's, you know, very selfless thing. And he's already such a great guy. It's not like he had anything to prove, but this just, to me, solidifies the fact that Zeb is just one of those great people that we're lucky to know and have around.
Oh, for sure.
Well, thanks again for joining us here on DLN Xtend. I'd like to continue the discussion with you on Telegram, in Discourse, Mumble, or Discord. Visit the DLN website for information on how to connect to the social channels, and also on shows and creators at destinationlinux.network. For more information on where to find us, if you go to my creators page in the creators section on the destinationlinux.network website, you'll find links to my different social media, my YouTube channel, and it's probably just the easiest way to find all that information rather than me listing them out individually. So that's where you can check me out. Nate, where can we find more about you?
Also, you can find me on that page with the different creators, or you can go to cubiclenate.com. That has links to my regular blatherings, another podcast that I do, and link to my YouTube channel. And you can leave me comments there. You can do it on the Discourse forum. I actually enjoy the forum quite a bit. I've been sharing some more things on there that I've been working on. And as always, we thank you for joining us. We'll be back again next week for sure with another episode of DLN Xtend. So until then, be kind to one another. Have a great week.
Have a great week, everyone.
See yas.
Do I sound hot to you?
You sound hot. No, I don't think you sound hot.
That's going in the show.